Some paths remember every footstep. Some routes learn your habits, your rhythms, your need to walk the same way every day. Sarah had walked this route for 3 years. Same time every morning. Same pace. Same stops for Max to sniff the oak tree on Maple Street, the fire hydrant by the Blue House, the corner where the bus pulled up at exactly 7:15. Max was getting old. 13 years meant every walk was precious, his arthritis making each step deliberate. Sarah had learned to match his rhythm, their morning routine, a gentle dance of patience and habit. The sidewalk felt different under her feet today. She paused, looking down at the concrete. Same gray slabs, same hairline cracks she'd memorized from 1,000 mornings. The one shaped like a lightning bolt, the one with the dark stain from last winter's salt. But something was off, like a word on the tip of your tongue that wouldn't come. Max whined softly, his usual enthusiasm dampened. He pulled toward home instead of forward, brown eyes clouded with confusion that made Sarah's chest tighten. "Come on, boy," she murmured, tugging gently on the leash. "Just our normal walk." But even as she said it, the word normal felt wrong in her mouth. The spacing between the sidewalk sections seemed wider somehow. The familiar crack patterns were there, but arranged in a sequence that didn't match her memory. She'd walked this path over 1,000 times. She knew every imperfection, every raised edge that might catch Max's aging paws. The oak tree was where it should be, but the shadows fell wrong beneath it. The morning sun cast light from the east, as it always did, but the tree's shadow stretched in a direction that made her stomach clench with unease. Max stopped walking entirely, sitting down with the stubborn weight that meant he wasn't moving. His ears flattened against his head, and he looked back the way they'd come with something that looked almost like longing. "What's wrong with you today?" Sarah asked, but her voice came out smaller than intended. The street was too quiet. No distant hum of morning traffic. No birds. Even the usual sounds of the neighborhood waking up seemed muffled, as if the air itself had thickened around them. She knelt beside Max, running her fingers through his graying fur. His body trembled slightly, the way it did during thunderstorms. But the sky was clear, that pale morning blue she'd grown to love on their walks. "It's just a walk," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "Same walk we always take." But when she looked up, the familiar intersection ahead seemed farther away than it should be. The distance between here and there had stretched, like someone had pulled the neighborhood taut while she wasn't looking. Max finally stood, but his movement was reluctant. Each step forward seemed to require conscious effort, as if he were walking against an invisible current. Sarah felt it too now, a subtle resistance in the air, a pressure that made each footfall feel heavier than the last. The wrongness settled in her chest like a cold stone. Their own to Elm Street should have been automatic. Sarah had made this left turn 1,000 times, muscle memory guiding her feet. Instead, she found herself walking straight, past the familiar corner, down a stretch of sidewalk that looked exactly like Elm Street but led in the wrong direction. She stopped, disoriented. The houses were the same, white colonial with green shutters, brick ranch with the overgrown rose bushes, split level with the broken mailbox, but they were arranged in the wrong order, like someone had shuffled a deck of cards she thought she knew by heart. Max whined again, deeper this time. He planted his feet and refused to move forward, looking back over his shoulder with desperate eyes. When Sarah tried to turn around, to retrace their steps, the path behind them had changed too. The sidewalk curved away in a direction that couldn't be right, leading to a street that looked familiar but wasn't where it should be. "This is impossible," she said aloud, but the words fell flat in the strange quiet. She tried the next right turn, thinking it would curve back to their normal route. Instead, it led to another street that almost matched her memory but not quite. The fire hydrant was yellow instead of red. The Blue House was the right shade but on the wrong side of the street. Everything was close enough to recognition to make her doubt her own mind. The morning sun hadn't moved. It hung in exactly the same position it had 20 minutes ago, casting shadows that never shifted. Sarah checked her phone. No signal, but the time showed 7:23 a.m. It had been 7:23 when they'd started walking, Max was panting now despite the cool morning air. His tongue lolled out, and his breathing came in shallow bursts. Sarah knelt beside him, checking his gums, feeling for his pulse. Everything seemed normal, but his eyes held a terror she'd never seen before. "We'll go home," she promised him. "Right now, we'll go home." But when she tried to orient herself, to figure out which direction home lay, every street looked like it led there, and none of them did. The neighborhood had become a maze of almost familiar paths, each one promising to return her to safety while leading her further into wrongness. She picked a direction and started walking, Max dragging behind her like dead weight. His claws scraped against the concrete as he tried to resist, but she pulled harder, desperation overriding gentleness. The street curved and curved, a gentle arc that should have brought them back to familiar ground. Instead, it delivered them to an intersection she'd never seen before, though every house surrounding it looked like ones from her neighborhood. They'd been walking for over an hour now, covering ground that should have taken 15 minutes, and the sun still hung in exactly the same spot in the sky. Max collapsed. He simply stopped walking and lay down on the sidewalk, sides heaving. Sarah felt his heart racing under her palm, a desperate flutter against his ribs. He looked up at her with exhausted eyes that seemed to ask why she was doing this to him. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know where we are, but something was watching." She could feel its attention like weight against her shoulders. Sarah carried Max in her arms, his weight making her shoulders ache. He'd stopped fighting, gone limp with exhaustion and resignation. His breathing was labored, and she could feel his heart hammering against her chest. The sidewalk stretched endlessly ahead. She'd been walking for 3 hours now. The sun hadn't moved a degree. Her phone still showed 7:23 a.m., the battery icon frozen, no signal bars flickering. Time had stopped, but the path kept extending, unrolling before her feet like an infinite carpet of concrete. The same intersection appeared again. She recognized it now, the red brick house with the crooked mailbox, the maple tree with the tire swing, the stop sign slightly bent from some long-ago collision. She'd passed this exact corner 4 times, coming from different directions each time. North, then east, then south, then from an angle that shouldn't have existed. The neighborhood was folding in on itself. Max whimpered in her arms, a sound of defeat that broke her heart. She set him down gently, let him rest on the grass beside the sidewalk. He immediately tried to curl up, to make himself small, but she couldn't let him stop. The watching presence was closer now. She could feel its attention like pressure against her skull, studying her movements, learning her patterns. Every time she tried to sit down, to rest, the wrongness intensified. The air grew thick. The silence became oppressive. The watching presence drew closer. Movement was the only thing that kept it at bay. "We have to keep going," she told Max, scooping him up again. His weight was nothing now. Adrenaline and terror had made her strong. She walked faster, her feet finding rhythm on the concrete. Left turn, right turn, straight ahead. Pattern didn't matter. Every path led to the same infinite extension, the same endless morning, the same suffocating attention. The houses began to repeat more obviously now. The white colonial appeared on every block, sometimes multiple times. The blue house multiplied, a dozen identical versions lining a single street. The neighborhood wasn't just folded, it was copying itself, generating endless variations on familiar themes. She could feel something hurting her. When she tried to turn left, the wrongness intensified until she veered right. When she attempted to stop, the pressure built until she moved forward. She was being guided, channeled, driven along predetermined paths by something that understood her routine better than she did. It knew she walked every morning. It knew her route. It had been watching her for 3 years, learning her patterns, memorizing her choices. Now it was extending those patterns into infinity, trapping her inside her own habits. Max's breathing grew more labored. His body felt too warm against her chest. She had to get him home. Had to find water, shade, safety. But home wasn't at the end of any of these paths. Home was somewhere else entirely, in a version of the neighborhood that existed outside this endless loop. The watching presence pressed deeper into her thoughts, trying to slip inside, to understand what made her choose one path over another. She could feel it learning, adapting, creating new routes based on her decisions. She started running. Her feet slapped against concrete, Max bouncing in her arms. She ran past the repeating houses, through intersections that multiplied as she approached them. The neighborhood blurred around her, familiar and alien, safe and terrifying. And still the path extended, unrolling endlessly into a morning that would never end. Sarah stumbled to a stop, gasping. The familiar intersection lay before her, the real one, with the coffee shop on the corner and the bus stop where commuters waited. Normal sounds returned like a rush of water, traffic, voices, the distant hum of air conditioning units. Max stirred in her arms, lifting his head with renewed alertness. His tail gave a tentative wag. The terror had left his eyes, replaced by simple confusion and fatigue. "We're okay," Sarah whispered, setting him down gently. "We're home." Her legs shook as Max sniffed around, his movements cautious but no longer fearful. The morning light had the right quality now, warm and golden, instead of that flat, unchanging glare. Her phone showed 10:47 a.m., messages and missed calls flooding in as the signal returned. 3.5 hours. She'd been walking for 3.5 hours in what felt like an endless morning, but now time moved normally again. Her supervisor had called twice. Her neighbor had texted asking if Max was feeling okay. She'd seen them walking in circles from her window. Sarah laughed, a sound edged with hysteria. Walking in circles. Of course, that's what it had looked like from the outside. Just a woman and her old dog, taking a very long, very strange walk around the block. Max tugged toward home with his old familiar eagerness. They walked the 2 blocks to her apartment building, everything exactly as it should be. The cracks in the sidewalk were in the right places. The shadows fell naturally. The morning felt like morning again. Sarah fumbled for her keys at the front door, hands still trembling. The key slid toward the lock easily, but something felt wrong. The brass looked the same, the door the same forest green she'd painted last spring. But the key wouldn't turn. She tried again, jiggling it the way she always did. Nothing. The lock was the same deadbolt she'd used for 2 years, but her key no longer fit. She tried the bottom lock. Same problem. Max sat beside her, panting softly, watching with patient eyes as she tried key after key from her ring. None of them worked. Sarah looked up at the building number. 412 Sycamore Street. Her building. Her windows on the 3rd floor, plants visible on the sill. But the numbers looked wrong somehow. The font slightly different. The spacing off by millimeters that screamed wrongness to her methodical mind. Mrs. Patterson emerged from the lobby, walking her small terrier. Sarah had chatted with her neighbor dozens of times, but the woman looked right through her with polite confusion. "Excuse me," Sarah called. "Mrs. Patterson?" The woman paused, studied Sarah's face with kind bewilderment. "I'm sorry. Do we know each other?" Sarah's mouth went dry. "I live in 3B. We've talked about our dogs." "Oh, I think you might be confused, dear. The Johnsons live in 3B, have for years." Mrs. Patterson's expression was kind but firm. "Perhaps you're looking for a different building." Sarah looked up at her windows again. The plants were different. Spider plants instead of the herbs she'd been growing. The curtains were blue instead of cream. Max whined, pressing against her legs. He was looking down the sidewalk, toward the path they'd just walked. His tail wagged slowly, uncertainly, as if he recognized something waiting there. Tomorrow, Sarah realized with growing dread, she would have to walk again. Max needed his exercise. She needed her routine. And the path, the thing that lived in the sidewalks and intersections and familiar turns, would be waiting. It had learned her patterns. Now it was changing her destination. The route would continue. It always continued. She had no choice but to walk it.